could we be given warning at the beginning of a programme if there's going to be anything about the Beatles, as all Beatle fans can make sure to listen, and have a chance to ring up other fans to make sure they are also listening?
Hi everybody, this is John here. This is Paul, George
and Ringo.
And we're very happy to be on your program once again.
Hello everyone, I'm Steve Marinucci and I want to welcome you to our latest Beatles News Brief show. The centerpiece this week will be a great roundtable discussion with two distinguished Beatle authors. Candy Leonard, who's the author of Beatleness, How the Beatles and Their Fans Remade the World, and Al Sussman, who wrote Changin Times, 101 Days That Shaped a Generation. And we'll talk about the Beatles' sweep of America in 1964 and doing a deep dive and look at what the world was like then, how the country reacted, and how Beatlemania lives on in the 21st century. And we'll have more after the discussion. We'll have a little bit of news and information to close things out. So let's get on with the discussion. Here's Candy Leonard and Al Sussman. I'm with Candy Leonard, author of Beatleness, How the Beatles and Their Fans Remade the World, and Al Sussman, author of Changin Times, 101 Days That Shaped a Generation. And we're going to talk about memories of the original Beatles invasion in 1964. Do you guys think that the stars aligned just right for them in 1964, or did they make it happen in a team effort?
I think it was both. It was, what is that expression about where the possibility and the motivation sort of come together? In other words, I think the moment absolutely favored them, but they had the talent, drive, social connections, networks of supportive network to make it happen. So I think it was a unique moment in post-war history. They might have had to go into the service. So many things were just right at that moment. Al, do you want to?
Well, a matter of fact, Bruce Spicer has mentioned this, that there were several, talking about the stars aligning, that there were several little signposts that accumulated by the beginning of January of 64, led to their breakthrough. I mean, he's even gone as far as saying that the fact that the CBS Evening News expanded in September of 63 to 30 minutes, which eventually led to Walter Cronkite running the Alexander Kendrick piece, which was viewed by the girl in Silver Spring, Maryland, whose name is...
Yeah, I know here. The one that
Carol James, yes.
Okay.
Right. And it led to her writing to Carol James, and then, on and on.
Right. Mm-hmm. Well, we're really, I mean, there's sort of two levels to talk about this on. There's a level, like when you say the stars aligning, you talking about for them to sort of keep slogging away for a few years and then come to America and everything exploding, or are you talking, sort of at the sort of macro level, if you will, or just talking about how it happened that, in other words, there's the technology and there's the girl in DC who heard them and got them to, but then there's like the big level. In other words, how did those things even happen in terms of what the world was like, both like in the UK and here, that allowed them to even get together and get to the point where they wanted to come here, and the rest being an incredible history.
Right. Or were the stars aligned just at that moment?
Well, I mean, would it have happened anyway?
Anyway, what?
Were they predestined to become famous?
I think they kind of were, actually, in a way. Yeah. I mean, what does predestined mean? I don't know. That gets, a little woo-woo maybe, but I think that, it was real. I mean, that was one of the things I think that's so special about it. There was this confluence of forces of things that happened, down to, Ed Sullivan wondering what all the hubbub was about at the airport, and, I want to book them. And so the assassination and there's so many things that kind of set the stage for this to happen. The transistor radio, the technology I talk about in Beatleness, when Elvis was on Sullivan 8 years earlier, I think something like 50-something% of households had television, which is kind of hard to imagine. 8 years later, the television was pretty much saturated in American households. So there's so many that just in that moment made it possible for them to reach this largest ever number of people and base that was bigger than any sentence I say in the book that sounds like hyperbole, but I don't think it is, and is that never before had one communication source been speaking directly to a population this big.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it just never happened before because of the size of our generation, both here and in Europe and around the world, Australia, and the communication technology that gave them this biggest ever megaphone to speak to the biggest ever audience who they held in rapt attention for 6 years, without parental intervening. It really, truly, every time I say, I'm sick of talking about the Beatles, I think about the truly unique phenomenon that this was.
You mentioned the assassination of President Kennedy, and Al, if I'm remembering correctly, you've gone against that theory, correct?
Right. I don't buy it because there were basically 6 weeks between the assassination. In fact, actually, there were exactly almost to the minute 10 weeks.
It was like 79 days.
Yeah, right. Between the assassination and the Beatles arriving at Kennedy Airport. And in those days, unless there was a death in your particular family, teenagers kind of recovered from traumas of one type or another, I think a lot quicker than maybe they do today. And so, I don't buy this trope that's been going for all these years, saying that if Kennedy had lived, the Beatles never would have made it in America, that sort of thing.
Well, I think the Beatles would have made it in America if Kennedy had lived. I agree with you there. However, I think it's also true, two things can be true at once. I think it's also true that I think the assassination did have an impact. What was lost with Kennedy, especially when you compare him to Johnson, this youthful, future-oriented, youth-oriented, sort of go-go, Hollywood looks, charisma, of Kennedy, New Frontier, that the Beatles represented essentially that same kind of freshness, that citizens of the world, that feeling of possibility and future and youth empowerment, like that, Kennedy started the Peace Corps and all this. I think it's, like Al said, I think that they would have made it, Beatlemania would have happened regardless. But I think that there is a sense in which perhaps there was this extra ineffable exuberance because of this, what I call the new frontier. In other words, they filled that space of youthful, charismatic coolness.
Right. The assassination hit my parents a lot harder than it did me.
Well, sure.
If we talk about the music, if there's one thing that the Beatles did accomplish in that initial invasion and years later it was invigorating the music. What exactly? And this may be a difficult question to come through with. What do you think their biggest contribution to the music was?
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second? I want to get back to, Al mentioned something about trauma, recovering from trauma. So I just want to talk more about the sort of the prison before.
Sure. Okay.
That you mentioned trauma in relation to the assassination, that it was not such a trauma. I mean, that perhaps, but I think that, there was a lot going on, like the whole Cold War was traumatizing.
Sure.
The civil disobedience, civil unrest on traumatizing. That I think that there's some element of trauma on the societal level, because we had never seen in our lifetime political violence like that, and then to watch the live murder on TV, which Steve said he didn't see, but I have a very vivid memory of standing in my friend's living room watching Ruby get shot, So I think that...
You mean watching Oswald get shot?
So, and the other thing too, as far as trauma, this is something I've thought a lot about in relation to fandom in general, but the Beatles perhaps especially, is that young people were traumatized also in their families by family dysfunction, by horrible teachers who didn't see them, priests who abused, I think that all these things, so the Beatles come and they're just all full of joy and love and youth, and they look straight on the camera in every picture, so their eyes follow you when you walk through the room. What could be more soothing to traumatized young people, So I do think that the trauma of the Kennedy assassination maybe not have been so much, but I think that knowing, just the Cold War, the fallout shelters, the duck and cover, I mean, we take it for granted because we grew up with it. It was like,
sure.
But it was fucking crazy, and we knew it was bullshit. I mean, even, like going under the table is going to save you from. So I think that there's a little bit of trauma in all of that. And I think that maybe that added a little bit to the jealous reception that they got. Okay. So now I just had to say that. Now the music. What was your question?
Well, the question was, if the Beatles did nothing else, they invigorated the music. That was one of the things that helped make them popular. I don't think we'd argue about that. What would you point to as far as they're invigorating the music?
Well, I think it's interesting because when I first heard I Want to Hold Your Hand, to ears that were accustomed to doo-wop and folk music and girl group pop, brill building pop, it was especially those first chords of I Want to Hold Your Hand sounded like something from Mars. Their sound was something that was very new. I kind of take issue with, the people that say that those, that the years between, say when Elvis went into the army and when I Want to Hold Your Hand broke out, were nothing but a vast wasteland of, novelty songs and teen idols, things like that. I kind of take issue with that because in 1963, there was a lot of great music here in America.
I think that trope is kind of rooted, if not in racism, but in the fact that, white America was maybe not listening to Stax and Motown at that time, but they were putting out a lot of really great music, So, I mean, it is true. There was a lot of bland, cookie cutter crooners were out. But yes, I think there was good music,
Sure.
At the time. It wasn't all horror. It wasn't all Pat Boone singing Tutti Frutti.
Right. Thank God.
Sure, there was a lot of great R&B, but also you had the Beach Boys, you had the Four Seasons. You did have this, the birth of the new folk music,
right?
With Peter, Paul, and Mary and the Kingston Trio,
and Dylan, of course, as well.
Dylan, of course, yeah,
right. But there was something different about them. They sounded different. They looked different. And they took all those, influences. Really, all of them grew up in musical households. And of course, being in Liverpool, they were, a crossroads in a way for culture and different influences. So, they kind of baked all that into it. And so it was something new, as they called
Yes.
the second or third American record, something.
Mm-hmm.
Given the strength, or I should say, given the power of the establishment back in those days, I mean, we all know how the establishment kind of lorded over everything and looked down on the Beatles. I was listening to a couple of clips this morning of guys. Of one was a barber in Denver, and another was I'm trying to remember who the other guy was. Oh, it was a musician in Denver. So they were talking about how much they didn't like the Beatles, and and I'm gonna try and I mean it was a great clip, and I remember the barber saying I'd love to get the four Beatles in my shop in these chairs so I could get my haircut. But what was it that got the older generation to accept them?
I don't know that they ever did completely, frankly. I mean, you mentioned the barber, the hair, as we all know, like the hair got a lot of attention more than the music in the early coverage. It was all about the hair and the out of control teenage girls. But people today, young people today, look at those pictures of them, and like that the fact that hair was considered such a big deal is really mind-boggling to them. But the hair was seen as extremely threatening to the status quo. I mean, it's hard. I mean, we know because we lived through it, but what a big deal the hair became, and it became, over the course of the decade, it continued to be a symbol of somehow you were aligning yourself with this thing, this new thing. But that was really threatening to the status quo. I mean, if you look at even today, how patriarchy cannot tolerate any gender ambiguity, right?
Yes. Oh, yes.
It's the same thing. I mean, that's why they didn't like it. And of course, parents, if your son grew his hair long, you were a bad parent. Everybody on the street was talking about what a bad parent you were. You're non-conforming, and this was still, we were, they think of it as like there's the Kennedy 60s and the Beatles 60s, right? So even though once they came, they started the Beatles 60s, there's still this holdover of this conformity, and like you see in early episodes of Mad Men, right? So the hair was really a very potent symbol, I think.
Just a personal story of the night that they were on Sullivan Show for the first time. Our whole family was gathered, and I remember I was laying on the floor in front of the TV, and my parents were in the back of the room. And I remember my dad looking at them and going, "Oh, they have long hair." He didn't like the long hair at all. And it's funny now. 4 months was it 4 months later when the Stones showed up?
Right.
He became a Beatles fan.
Right.
Because they weren't as threatening as
they were seen by comparison.
Right. They were safer.
They were. Were we as fans at the time sophisticated enough to know how good their music was, or was it the personality thing with each of the Beatles?
Candy, that's probably your your department.
It's interesting because we're all very different ages here, which really just proves how powerful they were.
We're not that different, Candy.
Hey, I watched the Sullivan broadcast at age 7.5. Okay, I know Al because I remember Al and I talked about this.
Sure.
Okay.
Was 14, right? Am I remembering?
Yep.
See, Al and I were very close because I was, like I said, did I say 13? I was 12 when Kennedy was assassinated. Right. And
so we represent, I was in second grade. You guys were in middle school or high school?
No, I was in like 6th or 7th grade.
Right. So, depending how old you were, you saw them differently. Your question was did we hear the music as something different and special? I don't know that I had I grew up with a lot of music, and we had Disney records, Three Stooges records. My parents listened to Sinatra, Stan Getz, Ella Fitzgerald. I grew up with a lot of show tunes, a lot of that stuff. What was different about this was not only the sound, but that it was for us. Like, there was the sense of, like, you weren't listening to somebody else's music. You were listening to something that was, just sui generis. It didn't come from Disney. It didn't come from, it just like appeared. It was like, what is this? And it was for us, and it was fun. And so, I at the time, of course I loved all the songs immediately and knew them and learned them immediately. I don't think I would have been sophisticated enough to compare it to what else was on the top 40 or anything. Maybe a little bit. I mean, it had, so much of this happened in community, like with siblings and neighbors and kids in the neighborhood. Like,
Sure.
My best friend downstairs, Cynthia, who was a year and a half older than me, but she had a brother who was older than all of us. And so he was listening, we knew already some, like, stuff, we had some sense of, like, what was out there, but this was just totally new, and also I think in those early days, it's hard to separate the perception. I mean, for me, I don't know, when I think about it even now, like, it's hard to separate how I felt about this song, that song, versus how I felt about the whole thing.
Exactly.
Because it was like it was like excitement and music. It was like this kind of cultural event that I was aware of as that, even at that young age, and that it came with music. No, I mean, Al, you being older, you probably had more of a way of, like, comparing it to what you were listening to, right?
Right. Well, it's like I was saying that my musical background was, of it was, pop standards, your basic Sinatra, Peggy Lee, Tony Bennett, but also doo-wop. I had listened to, my brother is about 8 years older than me. And he used to have a radio on in the bedroom, listening. This is in the mid late 50s, listening to Alan Freed.
Oh wow!
So I got indoctrinated in doo-wop music, and then the new folk, and so I had listened to a whole wide variety of music, and as I said, even that very early Beatles music was so, I don't want to say revolutionary, but it was so different. It was so different from what basically was out there in the pop mainstream. But it not only was it different, but also it was so good and so accessible.
Right.
See,
Go ahead. So it had a different energy to it, and
yes,
and the other thing too, these like, thinking back to those songs that, like, in April, where they occupied the top 5, those songs. These songs were short, they were repetitive, they in some ways were complex and artful and very musical, innovative ways, but the lyrics were simple. In other words, you could. The music welcomed you in, and it didn't take, you could hear it, 2 or 3 times. You knew it. You knew the lyrics. You knew when the break was coming. You knew when the verse and the chorus was coming around again. And it lights up your brain. Like the fact that She Loves You is like under 2 minutes or something, like,
right.
A bit over 2.
Yeah. I mean, these like little bursts of energy of so they were compact.
Yeah. She Loves You. She Loves You was actually, kind of the real focus. I mean, the media really got onto.
The yeah. That it was like the yeah, and the haircuts. They were like the trademarks.
Right. Yeah. Everybody got the woo. You know,
Yes.
And
where
the
they,
collarless, the jackets too got some mention, the collarless jackets, and I don't think they used the word androgynous at the time, but I think some people were saying they looked like women or girls or,
Mm.
matrons or whatever, that it was and of course it was seen as a gimmick, that it was a gimmick. The early response to them, I mean, looking back on it, was really so naive in a way, I think.
let's talk about the individual Beatles briefly.
Briefly, yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's funny that, a few years ago I did an article when I was back writing for the Examiner about I think it was actually directed at McCartney rather than all four of them. But there still today is, a core group of fans that really, their affection for McCartney has not died since '64.
Oh,
And
not at all.
and
No.
it's
Why
really
would
kind of,
it? Why would it? I mean,
Yeah.
well, I mean, I mean,
do you mean as
they,
an artist or just as a cultural figure or
as a
as a?
cultural figure, as an idol, I'm talking about it as an idol. I mean,
Of course, I
that's,
mean, why would they? And here's this thing: like, if you have been a fan of the Beatles from the beginning, they are so wired into your DNA. 5 years, 10 years may go by, you don't pay a lot of attention to them, whatever, but they're always there. And you'll watch something, or you'll hear a song, or you'll get into a conversation, whatever, you'll read something, and it'll trigger it again. So it doesn't surprise me. I mean, I think that anybody who says that he can still sing is deluding themselves. He can't.
yeah, I agree with you.
And the color is gone from his voice. That's how I describe it. I don't begrudge him going out and performing. He loves doing it. He spreads joy. It keeps him healthy. Let him keep doing it. But he can't really sing anymore.
I will say, I don't know when you guys have seen him most recently. My wife and I went to see him, I don't know, I can't remember the year, but it's like 3 or 4 years ago. And there's still a rush when he comes out on stage.
Yes.
Absolutely.
I saw him actually twice in 2001 and 2002. So that's already more than 20 years ago. And at the time I went thinking I wasn't so much going for the music because I wasn't that into it at the time, but I felt like, okay, this is my last opportunity to see him. Little did I know he'll be playing.
They'd still be out there 20 years later.
Right.
And go ahead. No, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I'll finish when you're done. Go ahead.
It's just that, like I've seen clips of him like that beautiful, there's a clip on YouTube of, I guess it's a couple of years ago already, of at Glastonbury when he's singing Jude. I mean, come on. This is a religious experience. I mean,
Absolutely.
it's not surprising that people still hold him in such high esteem. I'll admit, I dream about him regularly.
Really?
Yes. Let me rephrase that.
Thank you.
I have dreams in which he appears, and I'm a student of dreams. Like I study dreams and interpreting them and stuff. And so
Okay.
it's not that the thing with dream analysis is that every person in your dream is some aspect of you. Okay, they're not usually who they are. Okay, so he shows up in my dreams as some kind of archetypal figure of creativity, of motivation, a bunch of, I'm still studying it. But in fact, just within the past week, I've had 2 dreams.
Wow.
Well, he's just, like maybe I'm at a conference center and I run into him and we chat for a few minutes. And then he says, I think I'm going to have the salmon for dinner. And I think to myself, that's not vegan. And I wake up, and the reason I'm bringing this up is not to share my dirty laundry dreams, but just that they're so inside us,
Yeah. I mean, do you dream about Ringo that way too?
Ringo has not shown up in my dreams. George has. In fact, I had a dream not long ago that I shouldn't say this could really happen. that there was a chain of meditation centers, George Harrison meditation centers.
Wow.
It was a chain. And that there was one in my town, and I was in a car with a friend and driving. Oh yeah, there's one of George's meditation centers. So they show up in different ways, Yeah.
Now, the Paul that shows up in your dreams, is he young Paul?
No, he's now Paul. He's now.
It's the
Wow.
elderly Paul.
Yeah, he's yeah.
And it's funny that we're talking about voices. Ringo's voice is actually, I mean, who could have predicted in '64 that Ringo's voice would sound better than his today?
I know that clip of him from that last week with all those female musicians on this.
Right.
Oh yeah.
And every time I've seen him, he does jumping jacks at the end of the show. It's like, good God, I don't know that I can do as many jumping jacks as he does.
I'm still not used to him as a frontman, but I was very impressed with that last clip I saw of him. And I actually listened to the whole record. I listened to his whole...
The new record?
The new album?
Yeah. Not my genre, but I it was very nice to hear him doing that. I think we have such fondness for them that whatever they do is fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Al,
Yeah.
have you heard the new record?
Yeah. And it's I mean, I've given it 2 complete listens,
Mm-hmm.
and it's growing on me. Let's put it that way. There's a couple of there's like the first, and I'm forgetting the name of the first quote unquote.
Yeah, I don't
single.
have the CD in front of me.
Right.
I tell you, but
It's Look Up, right? Isn't this Look Up, which is the
Look
title?
Up is the name of the album. Yeah.
yeah,
but
it's not the first. It's not the first song though.
Okay.
right. The
But,
first that particular one is really good.
I really like the duets. I think the duets are tremendous. I'm a big country music fan. In fact, one of the things I'm gonna, and it'll probably be at the end of this interview, I'm gonna ask people who they listen to besides the Beatles, and let me ask you guys, who do you listen to besides the Beatles?
Now you talking contemporary people, or
Anybody, past, present. Give me like two or three names. I mean, I know who I'm thinking, but go
Bruce
ahead.
Springsteen,
Springsteen.
Billy Joel. I probably them more, at least of contemporary people. I mean, I was a big fan of the Beach Boys.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the late '60s, early '70s.
Mm-hmm.
I
got to meet Brian Wilson one time, a friend of mine who won a backstage meeting, and she asked me if I wanted to go with her, and I said, "Oh God, yes," and we did. And it was during the first Pet Sounds tour. When
right.
He did Pet Sounds, and he was
Mhm.
not. He was a little. Yeah, I mean, it was like he was in another world, kind of. But I did meet him, and it was interesting. Candy, how about you?
I actually go through periods where I don't listen to the Beatles much at all. Like, I mean, I hear them incidentally, and I have certain playlists that they're on. But as far as like, oh, I'm going to listen to Revolver, which I actually did recently, because I discovered that the Scott Freeman, who does the deconstructing, those are all available on DVD, which I didn't know. So I was listening to watched one of his Revolver and his Rubber Soul, which got me to listen to both of those records. I'm Swiftie.
Okay.
I'm a serious Swiftie. I may write about her.
Good.
I think she is brilliant as a lyricist. And I mean, maybe this would be another episode, but I think there are a lot of interesting compare and contrasts at the phenomenon level.
Absolutely.
I was good. Actually, that was one of my questions further down. We can talk about that, but I'll keep it short. But that's a good thing, Candy, for us to do in the future.
I mean, people for years, who's the next Beatles? Who's the next Beatles? Bay City Rollers, Nirvana, whatever.
Right.
Nobody expected the next Beatles to show up in a sparkly bodysuit, you know?
Right.
And there she is, and such a force for good in the world. And you know, I mean, it's hard to like know where to. It's so easy to just for this conversation to go all over the place. But one of the points that I talk about in Beatleness about how, and we've kind of been talking about it here, about how growing up with them as this constant presence in your life for 6 years with these interesting songs, lyrics, things to think about. Okay, that was 6 years. Okay, he's been doing this for 18.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah, I know. And she came from out of nowhere, practically.
Right. It's funny, I had never. I mean, if you want to go into Taylor Swift now, I mean, I had never paid that much attention to her. Really, I actually thought she was from American Idol. Like, I didn't really pay that much.
Who wasn't from American Idol for a while?
But then, like many people, well, I knew the only song I knew was "Shake It Off," which I loved. I just loved the attitude of it. But then, like many older people, I discovered her during the pandemic when she did with Folklore. Blew me away, and I liked it so much that I thought, okay, I need to see what she's about. And I went back to the beginning and listened to, this is the thing about Spotify, you can just do this, right? So I went listened to her entire catalog, and I was really impressed. I mean, it's uneven. I don't love it. I don't love it all, but you can see her development as an artist and as a lyricist. So I think her impact, I don't think she's done yet with her impact.
Oh, hardly.
Did you go to the tour? Did you see her?
I didn't get to see her, no.
No, I can't afford it.
Yeah, I know. It's very expensive. In my case, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean
to... that, and sorry, you asked me, let's go back. We can go back to Taylor Swift maybe later or in another episode, another conversation.
Yeah, I think I don't want to get caught up with Taylor Swift too much now.
But what else I listened to? So I listened to Taylor Swift. I listened to a lot of stuff from my youth. I still listen to Donovan. I admit it.
Okay.
Brings me great peace and calm.
Did you go see him at the fest when he was there?
I did in 2014. Yes, I did. I did.
Cool.
And that would get me back to the fest if they could get Donovan back, and if they let me interview him, because I'm his biggest fan.
Well, you should talk to Mark Lapidus and ask him.
I listened to Dylan a little bit. I listened to.
Did you see the Dylan movie yet?
I listened to Bowie a lot. I listened to, I don't know, just different things. I discovered Rosetta Tharpe a few years ago.
Oh,
really?
Love Rosetta Tharpe. Joni Mitchell, how could I forget?
Of course.
In my case, it would have to start with Hank Williams Sr. Jerry Lee Lewis would be another one, Sinatra. And just yesterday, I pulled out some Joan Baez records, and I really like her, especially her A&M period. I love that stuff. So there's my.
I also listened to Nick Drake.
Okay.
I love, and in that similar sort of genre, the Incredible String Band. I still listen.
Oh yeah.
Do you?
Yeah.
I keep thinking of John Lennon saying "Incredible String Band."
Yeah, no, they're really interesting. In fact, I was thinking of them recently again too, because I keep looking for things to take my grandson to that are not crazy expensive, that exposes him to some
right
up in New Hampshire. So there's going to be at the one of the nice theaters, one of the nice old theaters. This Led Zeppelin, this orchestra is doing the music of.
Oh, sure,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So we're going to go see that. And so in preparation for this, I made him he knew a little Led Zeppelin, so I made him a playlist. And so I've been listening to a lot of Led Zeppelin. And there are moments in, where they actually remind me of the Incredible String Band. With this kind of like very gentle guitar and a kind of Celtic vibe. I don't know. It's very nice. I mean, there's so much great music out there. I mean, that's why I like Spotify, is because you can it's like a big smorgasbord,
Yeah.
You have to buy it. You can just sample stuff, or if you're reading in the New York Times, like, okay, 10 songs you should know, So it's like, all right, I'm game. What are these 10 songs I should know? Usually I think they're crap, but occasionally it's something nice, I listen to a lot of disco also.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
My Spotify, well, it's because it's like exercise. My number one Spotify, they tell you at the end of the year what your
Oh, yeah. Mhm.
my number one song of 2024 was the Bee Gees' "You Should Be Dancing." I admit it. True.
We went, my wife and I, she's a big fan of them, but we both kind of like them. We went to see them on the one tour, and that was just astounding. It was, oh God, I still can't forget how good that tour was. It really was. It was great to see, especially now since Robin and Maurice are gone. But boy,
Mhm.
that was a wonderful. And we also saw Barry when he did the solo tour. And but boy, that show with them, and there is a recording. I think it's from Australia of them out there on that tour, and it's really nice. That was a great album.
When was
Um,
that?
thinking about 7 or 8 years ago.
Oh, that's
Um,
not. The thing about disco that I like is, I mean, I think disco at the time when it was very popular was not appreciated by the male music press, and so it was dismissed as garbage.
Well, a lot of it was.
mhm.
Yeah,
I mean, the good stuff, Donna Summer, Village People, that sort of if you consider the Bee Gees disco, which I don't, but the good,
they're not. I mean, they're sort of plastic disco in a sense.
yeah, it was really more like R&B, pop R&B. But anyway, the good stuff is really good. But there was an awful lot of, Ethel Merman doing a disco. There's no business like show business and stuff like that.
I have that CD. I have the Ethel Merman CD.
I have a playlist called Candy's Disco Delight.
Uh-oh.
Things like "Be Thankful for What You Got" by William DeVaughn.
Mhm.
I don't think I've heard that
Love,
one.
Barry White. "Come and Get Your Love," Redbone. "Don't Leave Me This Way," Thelma Houston. "Fly Robin
Mhm.
Fly." Then we have disco Bowie, "Golden Years,"
Oh, sure.
"Groove Line," "Heart of Glass."
Mhm.
I love Heart of Glass. I love it.
Rolling Stones disco, "Hot Stuff."
Right.
Okay.
Have you
Mhm.
heard that? you
Low
have the-
Down by Boz Scaggs.
Do you have the Beach Boys disco song? I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
Oh, Here Comes the Night.
Here Comes the Night. Yeah.
Yeah.
That one. "Miss You" by the Stones. More. I mean, there's so, and McCartney, "Silly Love Songs" is a beautiful disco song. The way it that flourish in the middle like
With
that,
it. Sure.
beautiful.
Mhm.
So I don't
No,
think
that's all the good stuff. That's all good disco.
"Young
Let-
Heart Run Free," "Turn the Beat Around."
Yeah.
All right.
Mhm.
All right. Let's end this on a Beatles note. Does the fact that Paul and Ringo have both managed to keep the Beatle legacy going as well as they have in two kind of different ways in any way surprise you?
Not really, because Paul especially, once he got over the whole thing of, oh, I have to have my own group, that sort of thing, because he really tried to make Wings into a real group, and really, when you get right down to it, they were just simply a backup band.
Mm-hmm.
But I think once he got over that and began performing Beatles songs, he really kind of took on the legacy, and to a lesser extent, so was Ringo with the All-Star Band. Since he does a number of Beatles songs, in the standard All-Star Band set.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and the fact that they've been, that they've been positive as far as all of the different, the Love Show and the and the anthology project and things like that. where they really have been much more positive toward those than, say, well, if John might have been, and at least at the beginning, George wasn't really all that thrilled. He had to be kind of coerced into doing the anthology, but the Love Show, that actually was an idea of his.
Yeah, that was his, and that's kind of when you think about that, that was kind of surprising that he went after that. He liked that so much. I mean, did you ever see the Love Show?
No, I never did. Never.
I saw it twice, and it was interesting. I mean, a lot of people I know were really big fans of it. I wasn't the biggest fan of it, but there were parts of it. While my guitar gently weeps part at the end was just amazing. And because they used the acoustic,
right, the
demo version, and
right,
to hear that in that situation was just amazing. But
yeah, I really regret not having seen that. I never made it out to Las Vegas.
How come we're not seeing you right now, Candy? Is that
you're an icon now.
Yes,
right.
You are. But anyway, well, I want to thank both of you guys for.
Are we done? How come we didn't even talk about George?
Well, we can talk about George. We don't have to be done. I told you. Do you want to talk about George? I mean, you did mention George a little bit earlier with your dream, but
Right,
I mean, no. I mean, George was an integral part, and he was, he was. I mean, as the years have gone on, he has risen to he's risen in I don't want to say importance, but I mean, his star has grown.
Well, I think recognition maybe is not so much rather than importance in terms of, his contributions, the role he played, and his, I mean, I don't think people, I think, I don't think he's been fully appreciated, I guess is what I'm trying to say, both as a contributor to the ultimate sounds, to the songs, but also as, at the sort of cultural impact level, I think he's also hasn't been sufficiently recognized.
Well, I gotta say, in terms of releasing archival material, I know they just did the Living in the Material World set, but he really has not done as much as John as Yoko has done with John, as Paul has done with his own. Ringo is the worst. I mean, I don't know what Ringo's problem is as far as archival material. There have been rumors for years that he was going to do some archival stuff, and he hasn't really done anything. I mean, he's stuck with with the All-Star Band stuff, which is fine, but and now he's doing the EPs and the solo stuff. I mean, but he could be, people would love to hear his his outtakes and things like that, and he just hasn't done it. So,
well, the only thing there is that really, aside from the really hardcore fans, the only albums that anybody else would be at all interested in here, in a remastered or remixed form, would be either the Ringo album from '73 and Goodnight Vienna from '74. Because everything else, I mean, there's a reason why his albums don't sell,
right?
Because they're not, they're not good enough, and there's just, I think the average person, even just like really the younger casual Beatle fans, don't really care that much about his material beyond Ringo and Goodnight Vienna.
Well, and initially Look Up has done really well, and of course they all do when they get released.
Yeah, but it's like the charts that's doing really well on are the ones that are really carried by people who buy the physical media, and that's that's his hardcore following.
Right.
And, nobody else, I mean, they'll start really, really high on the chart. And then like the second week, they'll be gone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when Ringo's came out, that album came out, how exciting it was that all the Beatles were on it. What a big deal, but yeah, I was never big into Beatles solo stuff. I mean, I've been listening to more Harrison and have become more familiar with his entire catalog.
Mm-hmm.
And it's uneven, but he was really something,
He really was.
Great loss, and what a complicated guy.
Yep. Although I will say I did listen. I don't know if either of you guys listened to the Mind Games reissue, and the whole hype was there about that was that it was overlooked, and I firmly agree. I really was surprised how much I liked it. I don't like I hate the way they put the outtakes on separate discs, and I wish they would put them all one song together. I think that would make more sense. But having said that, there's some great stuff on that set, and the songs of that album were really overlooked, especially in comparison to Imagine, the Imagine album. But in any event, yeah. What were you going to say, Candy?
No, I was just thinking back to John's solo albums. Yeah, I mean, I follow, I was listening and purchasing those, certainly more than McCartney. Although I think Ram is just, I think it's his best solo record.
Not Band on the Run? Not Band on the Run?
Something about Ram where he some kind of got over the end of the Beatles and really found something. I don't know. There's just some energy, some sound on Ram that he just sounds so alive and so ready to do music. I don't know. It's just something about it that it's like almost like a triumphal moment for the way that Bangladesh concert was at George.
Again, we want to give our thanks to Candy Leonard and Al Sussman for joining us today. If you have any comments or questions about the discussion, please send them to beatlesnewsbriefs@gmail.com. That's beatlesnewsbriefs@gmail.com. The Gripweeds have a new EP called Early Clues on Gem Records, released on January 31st, which may or may not be when you hear this. Anyway, we've heard the EP, and it's really great. It's a rockin' little record with 3 upbeat tracks and lots of guitar, and we recommend it. Let's see. Ringo will be touring this summer in Connecticut, New York City at Radio City Music Hall, Pennsylvania, Alabama, North Carolina, and Florida. More information is at ringostar.com. Interestingly enough, the Alabama date is only listed on Ticketmaster. Here's a few upcoming Beatle conventions in 2025 you might want to know about. And we're going to go do these in order. First, Beatles on the Beach is March 6th through 9th in Delray, Florida. Headlining is Ringo All-Star Band drummer Greg Bissonette. More information is at BeatlesOnTheBeach.com. The New York Metro Fest for Beatle fans is March 28th through 30th at the Hyatt Regency Jersey City. The guests include Colin Hanton of The Quarrymen. More information at thefest.com. Abbey Road on the River is Memorial Day weekend, May 22nd through 26th at Big Four Station Park in Jeffersonville, Indiana. Headlining that weekend is former Beatle Pete Best. The information place to go for information for that is www.arotr.com, as in Abbey Road on the River. So that's the way to remember it. Anyway, And International Beatles Week in Liverpool is August 20th through 26th. And more information on that is at internationalbeatleweek.com. Here's a few Beatles streaming shows we found on the services. Nowhere Boy, Imagine John Lennon, Strange Fruit, The Beatles, Apple Records, which is a great documentary, and Produced by George Martin are on Amazon Prime. John Lennon Murder Without Trial is on Apple TV Plus. Let It Be and Beatles 64, the latter of which we'll be talking about in an upcoming show, are on Disney Plus. The Beatles and India is on BritBox. And George Harrison, Living in the Material World, and A Hard Day's Night are on Max. And we thought, because we talked about it in the discussion, that I would throw this question out to you if you'd like to answer it. And the question is, what artists do you listen to that aren't the Beatles, either group or solo? Just trying to see, where your tastes are. As I said in the show, for me, it's Hank Williams Sr., Jerry Lee Lewis, Frank Sinatra, and Joan Baez. But we'd like to hear who your non-Beatle listening goes to. And again, you can send it to beatlesnewsbriefs@gmail.com and mark that one listener question 1 so we know that's what you're answering. Finally, we want to thank you for coming back and listening to the podcast again. We hope you'll subscribe if you're not already a subscriber, and we would love to hear from you. We're still getting kind of reorganized because we've been away for so long. You should find our podcast at your podcast provider. If it's not there, let us know. We did have some problems with a couple of providers, one of which, believe it or not, was iHeart. But we got that straightened out. iHeart has us. But your podcast provider or one you know of may not. And we would like to know so that we can get on that and make that happen. Again, send us a note at beatlesnewsbriefs@gmail.com. And thank you for passing the word and sharing us with your friends. And join if you're not a member already, join our Beatles News and Information group on Facebook. And until next time.
You seeing him? That one. Mark it fab.